right, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining. Hello, everyone online. So today we have Professor Daan Liang. He is a professor in civil construction and environmental engineering from the University of Alabama. He got his PhD at the University of Buffalo. And his work is in the area of disaster resilience. We are also very lucky to have him here, as he's also serving as a program manager at NSF right now. So hopefully we'll get some good insights about that. Yeah.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for coming to my talk and also the audience online. So I'm going to today to share a few insights about the disaster-related research as the National Science Foundation that I have been involved. So as I introduced that I'm a civil engineering professor, currently in the role of program director for SF. This is my third year. So I have been running this program called Human Disaster and Building Environment, which I'm going to get into more in detail. So I just start my presentation to show you our work that by the artist Julia Lauder. The title of this is called California. Right? So it's she's trying to describe that part of the state is on fire, and this actually is a part of a collection that went into the 5th National Climate Assessment. I was able to kind of go there and download this very nice picture. Okay. So today I want to really take this opportunity to talk to you about some of the critical challenges related to infrastructure systems, smart communities, and disaster for climate change adaptation. So as a program director, we have several main responsibilities. One is to review all the proposals that you submit to SF, making sure they got reviewed properly, and we make the wise funding decisions. But the other part of my job is to really interface with the researchers, either come to a campus visit like this one, or go to the conference, because we are very interested in learning what's exciting, what is frontier research that you guys are working on. So hopefully that will also help us to improve our programs. Okay. So far, I arrived here yesterday, and I also had a few meetings this morning. So I think in general, people have two kinds of questions. Number one is, what kind of research that SF is supporting and most interested in. The other is how do we get our idea in front of SF and get the support, right? So hopefully, through my presentation, you will have a better understanding. I know some of you have received SF support. Some might be thinking about applying to SF, but my goal is to, really communicate with our research community what our programs are for and how we can support your research endeavor. Right? So I kind of break up my presentation in 3 parts. So start with, what kind of problem we are addressing, right? So there are, the picture I saw at the beginning is there's, wildfire, earthquake, flooding, droughts, extreme heat, and if you go to even in this part, we do have hurricanes from time to time. I recall that. And then if you go to the East Coast, Gulf Coast, of course, hurricanes and severe storms in the middle part of the state. So definitely I want to really highlight the risk we are facing as a society, and then what we can do in order to address that from a scientific point of view, right? And then I'll transition into some discussion about, as a research committee, what do we know and what we don't know, right? What we know definitely have a potential to inform the policies and actions or behaviors. But of course, we, as a researcher, we want to focus our effort on generating new knowledge and new understandings. And then the last part is really talk about the kind of mechanics of ASF, the program I'm involved with, and how we basically support the researchers like you are here. Okay, so you probably have seen this report from the NOAA. So every year they put out a map like this, documenting the so-called billion-dollar weather and climate disasters in that year. So that really give you a kind of graphical understanding of, for a given year, what are those big, dollar or impact disasters. This is only, weather related, would be, flooding, drought, hail, hurricane, severe tornado, outbreak, wildfire, and winter storm. What is not included is like earthquake, landslide, volcano. Those are not part of their database, right? Because that's how the federal government divide their responsibilities. Some belong to USGS, some belong to NOAA. So just look at the snapshot of 2023. So you have a lot of severe weather events causing $1 billion in losses in the middle part of the country. And also you have the winter storms in the northeast. You have hurricanes and flooding in the Gulf and Atlantic coast. And if you move to the west coast, you do have the tornado and the flooding in this part of the country. And of course, last year we also had a wildfire in Hawaii that I have one picture on that. So what I'm trying to show you is that we as a country are very exposed to all kinds of disasters, right? Not just one time, and that kind of risk or frequency or intensity could increase because of the climate change. So this is definitely considered one of the priorities, not only for ASF, but for the entire US government. And also this is also look at the same losses or event, but by years. So they first published this report back in 1980s. As you can tell that, at the beginning, we only have like 3 or 4 of such events every year, but then in the recent decades, that number just increased so rapidly, right? So part of it is because of those severe weather events or hazards. Part of it is because of our exposure to it, right? Because more and more people, right? Instead of moving away from those areas, we're actually moving towards, right? People want to, come to California, even though we have earthquake here. People want to move to Florida, even there are hurricanes there. So those kind of compounded effects really lead to increases in the number of those events and also the total impact that those disasters have induced. If you really go outside the United States, just to look at the disaster impact from a global perspective. So there is a graph from Swiss Re. So there are 2 lines here. The purple one on the bottom is the insured losses due to natural disasters. So that includes both the geological disaster and also climate weather disasters. And then that's really, if you think about it, is how much money or the insurance company have to pay after disaster as part of their policies. And then the one on the top is the back line is the total losses, right? So because not every dollar of loss is covered by insurance policy, right? Only a percentage or a portion. So, if you look at those two lines, that probably you can recognize a general kind of upward trend. Some years you have multiple disasters, sometimes you have fewer, but overall, the total losses are definitely going up. And also the gap between the total losses and insured losses are also tend to widen. So what that tells you is if another disaster coming, you can only depend on insurance company to cover a small part of the losses. Who covers the rest? You'll be you and me as individuals, will be businesses, or will be the federal government, right? So that's really one of the key concerns we have is, you either, increase the share of the insurance coverage, or you find a way to reduce the total losses. Because I'm a civil engineer by training, so when it comes to disasters, the first line of defense is our infrastructure, right? It's either, flood control, highway systems, or power systems. Those infrastructures by design should really continue providing the services throughout, but they're not, right? If you look at where we are as a nation, ASCE give us a C grade in terms of the condition of our infrastructure. Probably some of you have been to Europe or Asian countries. If you compare their infrastructure to what we have, and the difference, right? So really that the challenge is that not only we have a pretty big area to cover as a nation, we have increasing risk, but our infrastructure is just keep deteriorating, and that's really create additional challenge for us. And last not least, we then sometimes we have those kind of black swan events that no one had probably we thought about it, but really doesn't happen very often. We have a cargo ship that just ate a bridge in Baltimore last month, and then you're just thinking about, okay, of course, it's a tragic event with several workers lost their lives, but also because of the port of Baltimore serving such an important role in our entire supply chain network. So that's really creates some cascading ripple effect, not only in that region, but really can be felt across the nation or maybe globally as well, right? Because some car manufacturers, they rely on Baltimore to send out their vehicles to overseas market, right? So the sooner we can get this fixed, so the better we can restore the supply chain. Okay, so all that really lead to really an event really kind of captured in this wildfire event in Hawaii, right? So if you look at the wildfire events, it seemed very unique, right? It's something happened in an island and killed a lot of people, causing a lot of damages, right? But then if you look a little bit deeper, you start analyzing it's a really a compounding disaster, because before the wildfire, there was a hurricane, which is not a big one, but it was a hurricane that's really knock out some of the power infrastructures, right? And also create some difficulties for the rescue team to come in, right? That is kind of the background. Then you start the fire, and then the Lahaina, the location of wildfire, they have a lot of visitors, right? It's not like local people, where things are, where you go. First of all, they have one road that's coming in and out. But then if you're not a local, you really don't know the geography. You don't know how to do, especially in an emergency like this, right? And also, I think we are still investigating, or the government is still investigating, is they have a good warning systems on the island, because in anticipating of earthquake and tsunami, right? They have very, probably one of the best. But those sirens were not activated, right? So they were trying to figure out, you probably have read some stories, so there are different theory about why they were not activated. People did not get the warning from siren, they got some other warning from other sources. Of course, there was also a loss of the power systems and cellular systems because of the hurricanes, and now there's a big lawsuit, I guess, pending because talking about who caused the fire in the first place. So the utilities, similar to I think California, they might be held accountable for that. So that's also add another layer of difficulty when the community trying to recover, because there are still pending lawsuits and slow arrival of all the resources. So what I'm trying to say is what's so-called rare events like this may not be rare in the future. If you think about all the different factors compounding each other, and this might be a new norm, right? Hopefully not, right? So then I will talk about some of the knowns and unknowns, right? You probably heard, known unknowns and known unknowns, right? So as a research community, what do we know about disaster and their risk? So if you probably, some of you are familiar with this Venn diagram. So the risk is the intersection between the hazards, the exposure, and vulnerability, right? So think about if there is a wildfire somewhere, but there's no people there, so the impact will be minimal, right? Or if there's an earthquake somewhere, but all our infrastructure are all hardened, so they will continue function. So the vulnerability will be very minimal. That means the risk will be minimal, right? So I talk about people keep moving to those high risk areas, so that definitely increases the exposure, and that's a key driver of the increased losses and increased risk, right? So we've been using this to guide our disaster management policies, drive a lot of FEMA programs, and because it's very easy to understand, it's been working pretty well, but then it has several limitations. One is really more like just look at those three elements, take a snapshot, but really not fully consider their interactions and not fully capture the dynamics between, especially the time dimension of the disaster impact. Then this National Academy report called Disaster Resiliency and National Imperatives was published in 2012, right? It's more than 10 years ago. That really coined the term of resilience. People start understanding the disaster, the impact is not just the damage. It's really look at what people do before that and how people recover after from that, right? So from that concept, people have developed this the system performance curve. So think about whether it's a power system or infrastructure systems. So before the disaster, you have a constant performance, and then because of the impact, it drops, right, for a period of time. And then as the recovery takes place, that performance curve should go back. So our interest can be kind of shifted or broadened to not only reducing the immediate drop, but also shrinking that the recovery time. So just to minimize the area that below that baseline, right? So that is kind of what's introduced as a new concept, and it's being really looked at intensively since by both the researchers and also the policymakers. And also this is later on, FEMA put that into their national disaster recovery framework, and they describe the recovery in three phases: the short term, mainly to just put some emergency services back in, making sure the injured people are treated, power is restored, right? And then you go to an intermediate recovery phase where can take weeks or months, and then there's a longer recovery that could take years, right? So depending on which disaster you're dealing with, depending on the location, so the three curves can have different shapes, and of course before that would be the period of preparation for the disaster. So that's really kind of extend or increase the scope of the FEMA. FEMA used to just focus on after disaster, emergency response, but now they're in charge of preparing for disasters and also long-term recovery. And then that also become a new program at the FEMA called the BREAK, Building Resilience Infrastructure and Communities Grant Program. So this really gave the FEMA additional tool in their toolbox to help the community to anticipate and prepare themselves from future disasters. So they don't have to wait for presidentially declared disaster, for example. So there's several 6 guiding principles. One is increasing their capacity, encouraging innovation. I think that's a place that people like you and me can really contribute to. Promote partnership and equity, enable large infrastructure projects, maintain flexibility, and last but not least, provide consistency. So they are already, in my opinion, even though the resiliency is still an active area for research, but the federal government is already, as a FEMA example, already implementing some of those concepts into their programs or operation. So then I brought up this slide talking about the data. Right now, we all hear about data, model, AI, machine learning. So I forgot where I got this code from is which is if data is the new oil, it needs to be found, extracted, refined. So there are a lot of challenges related to getting the data, getting the right kind of data, and making sure they are useful or usable. For example, we do need those data in order to drive a lot of models, right? The model need calibration, model need verification, especially the AI models, right? So when somebody pitch an idea to us about using AI for disaster, typically one of my first question is, where's that data come from, right? Do you have enough data in order to, train your AI model? Because that is totally a different paradigm. And the other thing we've been working on or struggle with is so-called non-design data. So as a researcher, you probably will appreciate every time we want to do a research, we design a very well-rounded data collection schemes, right? We know where to send the data or send the form to, who do we collect data on, how much data we have, that's all part of our research design, right? Everything, is really well developed and grounded, in theory, right? But now what we have is the data coming to us, right? So you talk to someone wants to sell the data to you, right? Some data companies, they have the cell phone data, they have social media data, they have all kinds of data they want to put the hand of you, but you have to make a use of it. So, but since we are not involved with data collection, we're not involved with the quality control, we really have no control over the quality and quantity of data, but they are available, right? They're available. Of course, they're always concerned over security, privacy, and fairness. That's also, we have a lot of, recent discussion about AI model being biased, right? Favor one group against other, depending on, how you design the architecture and where the data actually are used to train those AI models. But also because we are dealing with disaster and infrastructures, a lot of data are owned and maintained by different agencies. And sometimes they have concern about, the data being misused or being released by accident, right? So our researchers have to spend a lot of time talking to those agencies to figure out the way to make sure that their concerns are addressed. The other thing we also been dealing with is the cost of data collection and also processing and computing, because number one, if it's from the third party, a lot of times you have to pay for the data, and then you have to really have the storage, you have to find the computing resources to run your model, so that is not trivial. But still, I think the opportunity here is, as a researcher, if we can really work on those questions, but at the end of the day, what we like to see is, really we change the paradigm. Instead of, we build a dam or build a power station, build a highway infrastructure, and just hoping it will survive a disaster, or we could look at a new paradigm in which, we build a system, but we continue monitor the condition of the system in relationship to the hazards, and we can constantly monitor, adapting the system, changing, improving the system. So make the system more dynamic instead of just build it and just hope it will last forever.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So is actually like, for example, prediction and taking proactive measures also under the concept of resilience?
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
see.
Yeah.
Okay, and then for the model here, right, it's very interesting to see that. So this model is mainly for actually like, is it for kind of how to predict how our system gonna evolve, or actually like evolve under kind of hazards?
No, it could be both. That's what I said. Could be a couple model, because there are a group of people who are very good at modeling the disaster or modeling the climate change, right? But then we have good people look at the infrastructure performance. But sometimes what the gap is that how do you couple those models together, but also anticipating the shift in demographics, right? So if you build a infrastructure here supporting 1 million people today, 20 years from now, it will be $2 million living in this space, right? You have to account for the changes that's in the user side as well. So in order to, couple those models together is really something researchers are actually working on. So I might have a few examples later on. But the data problem is not only limited to the United States. So when I talk to my colleagues in other countries, you probably have done this as well. Actually, we're US. A lot of times they still use the US data because we do a pretty good job, collecting data, put that into the public domain. But then what I want to mention here is that, especially for disaster risk reduction, so there is an international agreement or framework called Sendai framework. It runs from 2015 to 2030 for over 15 years. But then we just finished a midterm review. So because the idea is to encouraging all the member nations to keep track of their progress against the different objectives. For example, one objective could be reducing the injuries and deaths from the disasters, right? So you have to keep track of every year how many people have been killed by the different disasters, right? Then you submit to UN. This is part of UN agency, UNDRR, and they will compile that, they will publish and put that into a graph like this, right? So if you look at, we just finished the reporting last year, I guess. Just to look at this globally, there's close to 200 UN nations, I guess. But still a small percentage of them are able to just report on people killed by disasters on the yearly basis. A lot of countries, they don't have a good system. right, of keeping track of them, right? That even become more difficult if you count for not only people killed, but also how many people are being affected, right? What is the economic losses? What's the interruption to critical infrastructures or services? What kind of disaster strategy, reduction strategies those countries are adopting, and what do they have in terms of international corporations, and last but not least is the warning systems and risk information made available to the public. So what I'm trying to say is the data issue problem is not only limited here, it's really a global issue, right? So in 2020, the US reported there's 38 different indicators. We only able to report 24 of them because the others we just never have a record of them, right? Decentralization, security concerns, lack of mandate and standard limit reporting. I think I was giving an example of, just think about missing people from disasters. There's no agency keeping track of them, right? FBI have a missing people database, but everybody is included there, right? They don't separate, from disaster costs or not disaster related, right? So they even don't want to share the data. That's also a non-starter. So there's a lot of opportunity to improve the reporting, and need to be a collaborative effort. I know some of the authors, they put together or they published a paper just highlighting some of the challenges in terms of reporting to the Sunlight framework. And the people actually are, I think the first two authors, they work for USGS, and they told us every time time for reporting, they have to go to each agencies and basically begging them to share the data. So we can definitely, I think, 2024, should we do better than this, right? Okay, so let's switch to something a little bit different. Is when it's come to mitigation, right? So what we can do before something happens in order to reduce the consequences and impact. So there's a known report stating that every dollar we put in mitigation, so there's a $6 saving down the road, right? To us, is a 1 to 6 ratio. That's pretty good, right? If you tell me I can make such an investment today, I get 6 times a return later, I want to make that investment, right? But the reality is that we as a local government, even private entities, you and me as individual citizens, we don't too concerned about mitigation or even disaster in general, right? So we do not make such decisions. We tend to be always reactive. We do something after something happens. We realize, we should have done something, but then, then after a year or two, people forget about it, right? So we keep running this cycle. But the other thing is that in addition to the data, what we argue is we also don't have a good methodology of collecting data or to use the data or the model the data. So one example is that when it's come to mitigation related to ecosystems or what we call the green infrastructure, you probably heard, green versus green infrastructures, right? We just don't have a good way of capture the return on such an investment. So the White House put together or released this report a couple of years ago, talking about or putting together a draft of national strategy for developer statistics for environmental economic decisions. So in this report, I found a very interesting kind of illustration, right? So for example, they said defensive expenditures are expenditures that prevent or reduce bad outcomes, right? So just like a mitigation, right? If you strengthen your infrastructure, putting straps or, putting some braces on your houses, it's going to save you when there's earthquake or hurricanes, right? But then they have a case where if you want to invest in creating an urban forest, right? So their upfront cost of, let's say, $40 million, right? But by investing in that urban forest, you could potentially reduce the illnesses or stresses in people living in that area, right? So the saving converted to the present value could be $60 million, right? You put down $40 million a day, you got $60 million return, which pretty good, right? Pretty good. But the complication is spending money on the forest save the economy, our economy overall $20 million, right? But if we are only focused on the GDP, because that is what most of macroeconomic models are based on, right? Look at the GDP. The GDP really, GDP-based growth is reduced by $60 million from loss in medical expenditures, only get $40 million in forest investment. So the money you saved actually does not come back to the GDP back, right? Because that's a save. So the GDP is only measured as $20 million less, even though the forest strategy save resource, right? So that's really issue facing actually a lot of local government, right? So you have limited budget. Are we going to spend money on mitigation today, or we just wait until some bad thing happens and then the FEMA come in, federal government come in, and they give us the money that we can use to improve our infrastructure, right? So it's a really interesting dynamic in terms of how that drive a lot of behaviors at different levels of the government. Let me give you another example. So this is really came from the latest national climate assessment. They stated that climate change really make it harder to maintain a safe home, healthy families, interrupting public service, and creating a lot of troubles for our economy. And many of the extreme events people are already experiencing will get worse because of the climate change, right? There's no argument over that. But when it's come to what we can do, right? This is what we feel is the kind of tools in our toolbox are very limited, right? So there's a table showing that, right? Right now, in terms of mitigation or what they call adaptation, how do we deal with the heat waves? We put more AC units into houses, right? How do we reduce impact from droughts? We ask everyone not to water their lawn during the summer months, right? So in terms of protecting homes from flood, so we elevate some houses, right? So if you look at those, some are very expensive in terms of elevating the houses. Some are very interruptive. Some are not very well received by the community, right? So what they argue in this assessment is we need to really come up with more innovative ideas, right? That really put us on a good footing moving forward, right? Not just limit ourselves to what we know and what we have been doing in the last 20, 30 years, right? So some example is redesign the entire city, not focus on the individual houses, really have a citywide initiatives that can address the heat impact. The other will be shifting water intensive industry to match projected rainfall patterns, right? We have a big issue here is agriculture, right? How do we move certain agricultures into some more water abundant places, right? It's not that easy, right? It's not as easy as what's on the laptop, but that's the opportunity for us to research on, right? The last not least is to direct new houses to less flood-prone regions, right? We know, right now which part of the region is more vulnerable to flood, which is not. How we really encouraging, incentivize, or even sometimes force people to move to those places, right? So there's a really there are rich questions that we can contribute as a researcher. So that really come to kind of the point I'm trying to make, which is not trying to offend anyone who are the scientists in the audience, but me as an engineer, what we feel is we don't just, our job is not only understand the problem, but really come with the solutions, right? So that's really something we should all strive for. So that really transition into some specifics related to my program, the program I also been responsible for, starting with HDBE. So we support fundamental multidisciplinary research, look at the interaction between human environment in the context of disaster. So it's really, if you look at our name, those three elements are there. They need to be also reflected in the project or in the proposal coming to us. So, but typically it's going to be interdisciplinary team. You have social scientists and working with engineers. Doesn't matter who takes the lead, but then they really integrate into hard. And of course, the only exception I have to say is career proposal, right? I got this question very often is, if I submit a career proposal to your program, I'm an engineer, how do we bring in the social science dimension? Or if I'm a social scientist, how do I bring the engineering in? So we do tell the panel that when evaluating the career proposal, use a little bit different standard, right? If they really tackle this as engineering issues, do they really have a good awareness of all the social aspects, right? We don't expect them to be the expert, but at least the way they describe the current state of knowledge, describe the approach, we feel confident, right? But the main innovation could be engineering, could be social science, or could be hazardous science. As I mentioned before, kind of echo what I said before, we not only interested in deepen our understanding of the interactions, but also explore the implication of those interactions, right? And so those two are kind of described as a intellectual merit of HDBE, but then you go to the broad impact. Our goal is really help improve the society's capability to learn from, prepare for, and respond to hazards and disasters. So we tell the panelists, at least when it comes to HDBE, broad impact and intellectual merit are equally important. So we don't have deadlines, and you can learn more about this program if you just click the link or just search SF HDBE. So I showed you this slide to give you an idea of the HDBE as a program also evolves over time. So before 2016, it was called Infrastructure Management for Extreme Events, or IMEE. And after 2017, it's really changed to a new program. And also we changed the cluster. So several programs got together to form a cluster. We used to belong to a different cluster. Now we're part of the operations and design cluster, together with several infrastructure systems, operations engineering, and engineering design and system engineering. So those four programs are currently together. But also I got this question a lot is, what are the hot topics or priorities of your program? So my standard answer is we don't have a priorities, right? If whatever said in the program description, that should be the one you should follow. But then I did a little bit kind of word search or contact analysis, look at all the funded projects by our program over the years. In going back to 2006, at that time, if you just search for the keywords, a lot of projects related to disaster or talk about disaster recovery, damage assessment, travel time, how do you evacuate. If you take 5 years later, they still, a lot of projects look at disaster recovery, but we have quite a few really dig deep into risk perceptions, right? When you issue the warning, how people take in that information and make action on that or take action on that. And also we got some project on using remote sensing, satellite imagery, aerial photos to improve our disaster response. And then you go to 5 years later, critical infrastructure become more prominent in our portfolio. And then risk perception, but also there was more emphasis on urban systems, right? Not focused on one kind of infrastructure, but how look at different infrastructure types and see how they are connected. And then fast forward to 2021, we've been getting a lot of proposals and award related to addressing flood risk, going back to evacuation, it become popular again, I guess, and then climate change, right? So there's increasing number of proposals specifically look at the impact of climate change and how we adapt, how we change in that setting. So again, as a researcher, you don't have to chase any trend, or there's no trend, or there's no shifting priorities. Just focus on what you can make the biggest impact, and then talk to us. I think that would be my response. And also, I want to just re-emphasize, for the HDBE, we have the 3 elements, but also we consider the 3 kind of legs for the HDBE stew. That will be the theories, method, and data. So when you present a new idea, you need to argue or convince us either you will make significant advances in theory, in methodology, or in data, because data become very more and more critical in our, I think, in any field, right? So that's why a couple of months ago, maybe a month ago, we partnered with the mathematics division at ASF to, they were really leading this effort on mathematics foundations of digital twins, right? Digital twins probably, I don't know about you, we got a lot of proposals on digital twins, but then, what they're looking for is what are the theories and fundamental methods supporting the digital twin development. So this is really led by the math division, and we are participating because they also want to connect it to some real applications. So that's where we come in, either disasters or infrastructure. So you can find some good use cases that you can test or validate your mathematical theories, right? So I have a couple examples of a career award we gave a couple years ago. There was a career award we gave to Central Florida. It was look at the shifting patterns of storm surge as a result of climate change and how that impact the coastal communities. And then, this year, this is one of the 3 we made this year. A PI from Florida, she's really looking into developing AI-based framework for modeling human behaviors especially in the transportation context. So the panel really see a lot of novelties. So then, in addition to those three legs, so I've been exploring in recent years about adding another one, what I call the international, right? Because disasters have no boundaries. So you have, earthquakes in Taiwan, you have, wildfires in Europe, you have other disasters. So, what we can learn from each other, what kind of knowledge can be harnessed and transferred between countries. So that is really something we consider as a kind of new dimension to not only to our program, but to the SF in general. So that's why last year we worked together with Japan Science and Technology Agency, GST, which is kind of NSF, equivalent of NSF in Japan. So we put together a DCL inviting proposal on advancing human-centered data for disaster resiliency research. So we got quite a strong response from our committee, exceed our expectations. So we didn't know, because that's required, you have a US team, Japanese team, put together one proposal and submit to both agencies and get our review. So the threshold is pretty high, but then we got quite a number of submissions and very high quality proposals. And I just released the third one. We were able to only have money to fund three. I just released the third one. It's on this slide, which is on the SFGST. So this is really from PI at North Dakota State University. He's a professor in business, really look at how the small businesses recover in both US and Japanese context. What is in common? What's are different? How we can derive some common theories between the two countries, right? So he has a counterpart in Japan, but also in the US, he has several co-PIs as well. But also last year, we sponsored the US-UK workshop. So this is ASF working with UKRI, and we really bring together a group of experts, look at research opportunities in the urban underground infrastructures, right? Not necessarily applicable here, but if you go to some major cities, so they are developing their infrastructure vertically, going deep in the underground. How do you coordinate? What are the research questions? So this is something we are very interested in, and we are hoping that that will turn into a program similar to what we did with GST. If you really want to know the priorities, what I can point you to is the priorities for the agency, the National Science Foundation. Every year, when we submit our budget request, in that document, which is available online, so the SF will identify some major investment foundation-wide, right? So this year, in our current latest budget request, there are a couple of things. It's AI, or we call it, it's not called AI, advancing emerging industries, which include AI digital twins. The second one is the building resilient planet. That is very relevant to the material I just presented to you, and also very relevant to my program. And another one is creating opportunities everywhere. So that really speaks to our desire to broaden the participation. And last but not least is called strengthening the research infrastructure. We'll continue funding individual PI-based project, but now we also put behind a lot of resources in developing a shared use facilities, right? We have UC Davis. I think they have a centrifuge, which is part of the NARI. So you have big shake table at UC San Diego. you have wind tunnel in Florida. So if we can develop those research infrastructures and then allow, different PIs, investigators to make use of it, so that is a big push for us. And because I'm more involved with the NARI, called the Natural Hazard Engineering Research Infrastructure, supported by SF. So they just finished a decadal survey and released this report probably a week ago. So in this report, I just highlight some summary of that. So they also, based on the input from the researchers, they also identified the need to developing more research infrastructures and making them more accessible to the research community, right? But also they mentioned about the gaps in collecting the field data and also collecting the longitudinal data, right? From a lot of communities, you just don't only care about what they behave right after. You want to keep track of the recovery. That will take years to collect. But currently we don't have a good way of conducting the longitudinal studies. Right? So those are a few examples. Okay. So what are the tips for preparing the proposals? I want to start with that SF is just like a university. So we have colleges, department, here we have directorate, we have divisions, right? So sometimes you just lose track of who's doing what, right? Sometimes we're doing similar things, we never talk to each other. So that also happens very often at the SF. So, when you have an idea, you can look at the core programs like a HDBE, you can look at the specific solicitations, and also the career program that's everywhere, right? So you have dear colleague letters like a US and Japan collaboration, and you have some center type opportunities, right? Setting a new center, working with the industry, setting up a new infrastructures. But also for the core programs, the main fund goes toward either career or regular proposals. But a lot of times we can also pay for or support a planning grant, right? You want to hold a workshop, for example, right? Identify a new area or new opportunities. You want to plan for something, or in my program, we after the collapse of the bridge in Baltimore, we supported the rapid, so allowing the PI to quickly collect the data before they disappear. And also, if you have an active SF award, we can provide supplement. You want to bring in an undergrad, we can give a supplement. You want to bring in a graduate student working as an intern somewhere else, there's an intern supplement. Or there are different, we even have a supplement more recently, if you want to travel to European Union to build or strengthen a collaboration, so we can give you a supplement. So how much time we have?
Probably in the next 5-ish minutes so that we can have questions.
Okay. So the other thing I want to mention quickly is in addition to my core program, I also co-manage the program called Smart and Connected Communities. That's where you really work with the community and bring their challenges into your research project and really work together in order to come up with more innovative solutions. So if that is, you're not only satisfied or interested, publishing papers or giving a lecture, you really want to see your research can have a real impact. I strongly encourage you to consider the SCC program. And there's a big disaster or civil infrastructure piece of that. And also kind of related to that is if you already have a solution almost well designed, tested in your lab, but you are ready to pilot that in a real environment. So you can look at the Civic Innovation Challenge. So you will get 1 year, $1 million to work with the community partners and really implement or pilot or test that solution and make whatever changes, right? So this is also a partnership between SF and Department of Energy and Department of Homeland Security. So this is wildly popular program because we just ended the competition 2 days ago. It just number of submissions really exceeded. This is third time we're doing this, and every year or every 2 years, the number just keep increasing. So, of course, there are some other disaster-related programs. If you are more focused on in the structure or infrastructure performance, there's a ECI program to consider. Somebody who's more focused on the hazard side, describing or understanding, the flood itself. There is a new program put out by the Geo Directorate called Confronting Hazards, Impact, and Risk for Resilient Planning, or CHIRP. We have a long-standing program, SBE, called Decision Risk Amendment, and another program put forward by the new directorate called Responsible Design, Development, and Deployment of Technology. One of the 3 tracks is climate change and disaster. Guess we don't have time to go. The important one. So I had mentioned that you really can come to us depending on your scope and interest. You can start with something small, and you can go all the way to building a new, next generation research center, if that's what your interest is, and anywhere in between, right? Okay, maybe this is. We will appreciate very much if you want, if you can come to us before you submit a proposal to either send us a project abstract and give us maybe we can find the time to chat because sometimes what the PI think is different from what we think. So you're just making sure that our thinkings are aligned, especially when it's come to a fit or not fit with the program. So the best way is to just send us abstract for evaluation. And this is something I'm going to end up with is consider code reviews. So if you really, a lot of the PIs coming to my program, really, they're doing the interdisciplinary research cut across more than one programs. So what I encourage them to consider a secondary program that will co-review their proposal, right? Could be HDBE together with Geo or together with computer science or together with others. So because the code review really give you some additional feedbacks, but really increase your chances of being successful. Okay, so I think I can go into some details, but maybe you might have some questions. So I'm going to end here. Thank you very much.
Okay, and as is tradition, first question from students.
Yes, thanks for the great presentation. In one of your earlier slides that had the Venn diagram, you had a measure for infrastructure performance. And I was curious, about what factors go into measuring infrastructure performance, but also how can you holistically look at the performance of infrastructure, especially in the context of a disaster when some of the infrastructure's output might go down. Like, how would you measure it in the context of lack of data, or when you don't have enough information to model?
Right. Yeah, I think so a lot of times we as engineer, we rely on, empirical models or, analytical models that, give us, based on some limited testing or understanding, so we can anticipate, given this intensity of disasters, this is likely performance, either in the aftermath or over time. So that really has a big error band, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, right? That's really what we are trying to. That's a active research is how do you reduce that uncertainty, right? Because the society or committees are depending on the functioning of or restoration of such services. So sometimes if you have such a big error bars, it's very difficult for somebody to make a use of that. So definitely. So the data, I think, has a potential. And also, I think the AI probably have a potential too. Because as I said, even if you look at individual disasters and locations that are quite limited, but then, what about the other countries, right? If you can build a global database of all kinds of disasters, I think you might have a good sample size to work with.
Right. Maybe a quick follow-up. Like more specifically, for example, in some of the infrastructure we work with the EV center, like if you're working with charging stations, we might not have, like if you're just measuring how many vehicles the infrastructure is serving, it might not fully capture the total performance of infrastructure. Like in that context, how would you think about modeling it?
Yeah, I think maybe a different way to answer that is even the performance matrix or indicator itself are the topic of the subject of the research, right? Right. It's because we are very often, depending on which agency or sector you're dealing with, they have their own, matrix, right? If I'm the utility companies, how quickly I can restore the power to my ratepayers, right? Within a week, it's either 90% come back or 80%. But what is missing is the granularity of the people affected, right? Because people who have resources, not have resources, people really life is depending on the electricity. People have medical, needs, and versus people like you and me, we can, if I lose power, I can go somewhere else, right? So just having that aggregated number is sometimes it's just you overlooked the different variation in the impact. So that's really, again, that's something we actively look into as a research question.
Thank you.
Maybe that's a question, more on the NSF side. I'm just kind of curious, is NSF, aside from just the quantity of funding, are they affected by political, environments?
I think what I can see is if you look at the entire US government, probably NSF is probably most isolated compared to other mission agencies, right? So, we really take a pride of our independence, right? From the, they're always, we report to the White House and, it's, the director is appointed by the president. We can, our budget is controlled by the Congress, but we have a lot of independence, right? That really benefit from, our support, giving to and receive from our research community, from the universities, because that's really make our agencies quite different and unique, and we value that. But at the same time, OSTP, Office of Science and Technology, OSTP, they always push out the administration priority. So what we do is try our best to align what we invest to those priorities. Those priorities are very broad and generally it's not that hard for us to do because we have such a large portfolio.
Yes, I was going to ask you, a number of the themes you touched on today when it comes to climate resilience and climate natural disasters. Reading a book, the title is All Hell Breaking Loose, the Pentagon's Perspective on Climate Change. And in this book, the author, Michael Clare, he makes essentially a good graph similar to yours, which shows the year by year increase of the times that the federal or the national military has had to come in and aid state governments in addressing climate disasters. And he touches on a theme that you touch about is how state governments are very reliant on the federal government, and it's allowed them to become almost apathetic for their own climate resiliency.
Right.
And in the book, it talks about how the military, it's not their actual stated goal to help state governments and FEMA address climate disasters. To what extent actually should we be empowering and requiring state governments to not become as reliant on both federal government for the emergency and post-emergency federal dollars to just clean everything up?
Right. Yeah, I think we had a conversation earlier with one of the researchers. I think we all agree that either as individuals or as a community, we need to take a more of ownership, right, of our actions combating climate change, just not kind of outsource that to something else. So I think when it comes to disasters, I agree. We all make our own decisions, and then we should be rewarded if we make the right one, or being penalized if we make the wrong decisions. Business will be the same, and communities, they can follow the suit, because the federal government, if you think about it, you probably follow the discussion after disaster. There's a lot of debate about how much money will send, but the missing part in that conversation is how long, right? Because communities sometimes, I work with Harris County after Hurricane Harvey. The communities after the disaster, 2-3 years, so they have not received any money from different agencies, right? Even though it's already appropriated by the Congress. There's such a delay, there's such a bureaucracy. I'm thinking if you're a small business or whatever, those 2 years, you just already, close your doors, right? So that's really, there's no agent, or I shouldn't say there's no urgency, but it's just a slow process. But then I think the counter argument is, why don't we just get together, find an alternative? Right? Because that is, let's find a more efficient, more quicker way of deliver or, this assistance without, the bureaucracy. So that would be, I think the FEMA is also moving toward, I've heard they start, or at least pass a new program that will give cash payment directly to people affected. They used to be, you have to apply, right? You have to document, you have to, there's a lot of hoop to jump. Now they say, okay, if you happen to be in the area, if you are affected, we can give you a cash payment, right? You can receive it right away. So I think I think the federal government is aware of that, but the pace of their actions sometimes is very slow.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very interesting talk. So one of my questions is that, so for online search proposal, or actually like for any project planning, a big part is like how are we planning to evaluate actually like the final deliverables, right? Actually, but for like a disaster, actually like natural disasters, it's kind of it doesn't happen very often, and then we can't do experiments about this. So how are we expect us to kind of evaluate basically the result? Because I'm actually coming from a mechanical aerospace engineering background, and then just kind of when I'm writing proposal like that, I mean the NSF just expect to do experiments.
Yeah.
You have to reproduce in real scenario. But I think in the natural disaster context, right, it's going to be much harder to do that.
Yeah.
So should we kind of, if we kind of rely on past data to do it, right, then it will further limit the data that we could use to develop the model and then calibrate the model and things like that. So yeah, can you actually give some advice on
Yeah.
that aspect?
Yeah, this is definitely, that is one of the barriers that we, as a disaster researcher, is facing is, your study is the community and infrastructure, and there's some very limited things that you can do, right? You can not tell DOT, do this, change that, and see what happens. So that's why, as part of this report, the research community have identified there's a need to establish the community-based test bed, right? So we're not just creating a, artificial, some small scale thing that on campus, you run a few things and just, get the, concept tested. So we're really looking at have a setup where, really you have a community that are willing to partner and we can really implement some of the new policies, right? What if we upgrade the building code? Right? What if we require everyone to, put some, retrofitting devices into their house? What if we, change the evacuated route? So any, new ideas or new concept, once it's past the kind of laboratory stage, we will work with the committees and see how they really perform in the real setting. So this is really the concept and the opportunity that being proposed and captured in this report, which I'm very excited to read.
There's a couple of Zoom questions too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm okay, so question, does the scaling of a newer technology that prevents gigatons of emissions from transportation and hard to decarbonize sectors fall under a REDDPOIT grant? And second question, how do we become NSF proposal reviewers?
Okay, I'll start with the second question because that's easier. So in order to become a reviewer, number one, you are a faculty position, and number two is you just basically send your resume or CV to the program directors, expressing your interest, maybe have a few keywords about your expertise, and then when the opportunity comes, and we'll find a way to invite you to the panel. So especially for the junior faculties, and we love to have you because you not only bring in the latest cutting edge ideas to the panel, to the discussion, but also that's a very good learning experience if you want to improve your proposal down the road. So we always, welcome the first time, reviewers or the junior faculty to be part of the review process. So yes.
Just faculty or research scientists, engineers?
Yeah, that's,
Also,
we often do not invite the,
I've seen one in other panels.
it's depending on panel. Sometimes we open to the research scientists. We even invite some people from national lab from time to time.
right, yeah, and like here at the Institute of Transportation Studies, we have both faculty and quite a number of researchers.
Researcher, right.
Yeah, researchers.
Right.
And
So I
some
don't
of
think
them are
there's
very
a
active.
rule to exclude them, but it's not the very typical.
Not typical, okay. So you can be, but
Yeah.
case by case.
Case by case, yeah, that's right. So the first question is
First
for
part of
the
it was if it falls under, I don't know if you know
the red dot?
red dot, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. They really look at, when every time you deploy new technology, we have to really consider seriously about the unintended consequences, right? All the implications. So, whether they are ethical, they end up creating more harms than benefits. So I think that would be something could fit with this program.
And then one more question. Are there efforts or collaborations being deployed to obtain data from and or for other countries?
That's an interesting question because I got such increase. I think the short answer is yes. You know, for example, there was an earthquake right after the Christmas in Japan. If you remember, there was an earthquake and then caused some fires, house fires after that. So we actually supported Rapid, allowing the PI to. They already have a Japanese collaborator, so they quickly traveled to Japan to collect some data because what's unique about that event was I think it happens 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the evening. So a lot of people are not getting the alert. And that also kind of changed their regular behavior. So being a nighttime event, so there could be some new lesson learned. So that kind of justified them of traveling all the way to Japan and collect data. So we do that again on the case by case basis, but definitely we can. But provided that you already, number one, there's this new science that we can gain from that data collection. Number two, you have some local connections. We don't want to send something who have never been in this part of the world before and they try to figure out, what do I do and who do I talk to? That is not something we encourage.
So for the HDBE program, does the proposal specify to directly address disaster-related issue or indirectly, for example, if you have, electric or fuel cell vehicles, you can configure the system to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that sort of change the climate risk and things. So that kind of thing is considered too far-fetched or?
The short answer is yes. We got that question a lot. So what we tell the PI is that the disaster, or in that sense, would be human, or because every disaster also impacts humans. So what we tell them is a disaster, human, built environment need to be part of your intentional merit. Right? So in terms of, your project is going to, help people, help the community, that's broad impact. So, but when we evaluating whether it's fit or not fit, we focus on what are the research questions and how they are captured in your intellectual merit.
The disasters?
Yes.
On core component.
Yes.
Directly.
The core.
Thank you so much for your fantastic presentation. I have 2 questions. First of all, I'm kind of curious about the topic of autonomous vehicles and self-drive pods in a response phase of a disaster. If we wanna submit a proposal in this topic for risk mitigation, do you think decision risk and management science, DRMS, is the best sector, or?
I don't think so. I think the DRMS is for them, disaster is one of the sub cases, right? Because they cover risk very broad. So when it comes to disaster, it's just one part of what their program focus on. So they're really focused on the decision making, either by individuals or by organizations, and perceptions and cognition, all those things. So when you really have a heavy emphasis on technology such as autonomous vehicles, it might not be a good fit, but you can contact their program director, just making sure.
And for my second question is about, as you mentioned, focusing on mitigation phase is really good investment, kind of turn $6 for each $1. But my feeling is, all the, not NSF, generally policy making here, more focused on response phase for assigning the budget and funding. For example, in wildfire, 80% of the budget goes to
suppression and, managed fires, while just 20% go to field treatments and the forest. As you mentioned,
Yes.
it seems we prefer to battle with fire in, for home hardening and inside the houses rather than fight in the forest, and because it's, kind of really important. So do you think what I'm trying to ask is, do you think when we submit something in mitigation and preparedness phase, it has, lower chance based on, historical data of, NSF proposals?
To address in we don't do anything, this will continue, right?
Yeah, but for example, for, Hawaiian wildfire, for me and some other, researchers mentioned the problem of the electric wires. Many times in many workshops, but just after a, catastrophic wildfire, everybody, it's absorbed the attentions for, a double disaster, hurricane and wildfire. So I think I'm really interested to submit proposal in this space, but I'm a little afraid about maybe NSF prefer to kind of invest more in recovery, rebuild, response phase, emergency phase, rather than long term with kind of a little nonsense, efficiency at that time. Maybe it's not just my feeling.
No, I think my response will be, yeah, we'll welcome any new ideas or the project that will lead to some new understanding. Yeah, so it really doesn't matter if focus on, which phase of the disaster. So as long as